This is the Bureau of Lost Culture, and this is Penny Rimbaud.
Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5.9 shells that dropped behind. Gas! Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light as under a green sea I saw him drowning.
Hello, I'm Stephen. I've held conversations with over 150 people in the last few years, but no one quite like Penny Rimbaud, who has spent more than half a century living the ideals that most of us only talk about. Penny's been described as a beat philosopher, an anarchist, a Zen Buddhist, though I'm not sure he would recognise those descriptions. He's certainly an artist, a poet and a musician. Born Jeremy John Ratter in 1943, he came of age in post-war Britain, as we'll hear. And in the late 60s, together with the artist Gee Vaucher, founded Dial House, an open community and creative refuge in rural Essex. It became both a home and a hub, a living experiment in anarchism, art and radical living. And from Dial House emerged Crass, a band that tore apart punk's nihilism and replaced it with a fierce moral energy. Anti-war, anti-sexism, anti-consumerism, but pro-peace, pro-freedom, and defiantly DIY. Their black and white graphics, polemical lyrics and uncompromising stance made them one of the most influential, challenging acts of their time. And when Crass disbanded in '84, Penny kept on creating, often with Gee. He's become a prolific poet, writer, spoken word performer, continuing to explore themes of love, pacifism and spiritual autonomy. Now in his 80s, he still lives and works at Dial House, still questioning authority, still seeking truth through art and language. When I invited Penny to the Bureau, I thought we would, walk through his countercultural life, talk about how he co-founded Stonehenge Free Festival and then Crass. It didn't quite work out like that, as you'll hear. We barely got to the 60s, so this is just part one of our conversations. We range back and forth across some personal history and across Penny's thoughts on culture, capitalism, art, and the very notion of the self. We hear how foundational, how influential finding a particular book was in his parents' library when he was a kid. I found it a moving and at times challenging conversation, challenging to my own sense of authenticity and commitment to culture. Penny's still raging, but it's a rage that swells out of a deep love and sense of peace. In his own words, there is no authority but yourself. So, here we go. Penny Rimbaud, it's a great pleasure to see you here at the Bureau of Lost Culture.
It's nice to be in Soho.
You've not spent much time here recently, have you?
No, I spent a lot of time as a kid here. But
did you?
Yes. Ain't what it used to be.
Speaking of that, it's been a long journey. You're still on it. Do this kind of strange thing which we might call counterculture or whatever. I thought we could just go back to the beginning. Mm-hmm. I mean, you were a war baby, right?
I remember, I spent a lot of time under a table rather than around the table because the bombs were still going off. I don't remember it, I know it. I don't do memory to an extent because I think we remember the things we choose to remember to actually be the person we're choosing to be on that particular occasion. And I mean, I've started noting that years and years ago, how the same story was told differently to whoever it was being told.
Memory is like the imagination of the past, right?
Yes, absolutely. I have got a series of memories. Some of the stories have developed, some of them have been thrown out, or some, because it's just storytelling. In daily conversation, I avoid anecdote, because anecdotes are so much about who you want to be, and they're not actually about anything of any real value.
In terms of the memories and the anecdotes, what is the first one that you can bring to mind then?
Victory Day, whenever that was, and wandering around with sparklers, with my brother, and Mum being very happy because she knew probably Dad was coming back. I don't think I deliberately set fire to my brother, but I might very well have done. But I poked him with my sparkler, and that caused a bit of disturbance. So that was a sort of first memory.
Does he remember it the same way?
Well, he's dead now, so I don't know.
What were your folks like in your family? What was it like?
Very Victorian. Dads who are these abstract, smart characters who meander around. Mum sort of representing Dad's ideas a lot. Dad wouldn't tell me off. That was Mum's job.
Well, he passes disapproval on to be communicated by your mother.
Yeah. I mean, when I hear about other people's families, I don't recognise that as my own. I mean, I didn't know who they were. And at times, as I grew older, I started doubting that they were anything to do with me.
Because you felt so different, you mean?
Yeah, I guess so. I just didn't relate. And I didn't relate to my brother particularly, and I didn't relate to my sister. I don't have all those sort of, happy times on the beaches, sort of. I'm sure I did have happy times on beaches, but that doesn't seem to me to be how it was. It was all rather abstract.
Were you sort of like a middle-class background or something?
Yeah, it was very middle-class. Mum and Dad were both northerners who had adopted southern affectations. Mum spoke more like the Queen than the Queen did. And it was all put on. But Mum was from Yorkshire and Dad was a Geordie. There was no suggestion of that till he got Alzheimer's and he started reverting to Geordie. And I always felt that he suffered class guilt. He'd moved up many classes from essentially a sort of working class background into access into sort of upper class,
right?
Not just middle class. It showed so heavily when he got Alzheimer's that that person he had been started trying to find space again. I always said I didn't know him until he got Alzheimer's, and then we had great fun together because we were on the same level.
The persona he constructed carefully over the years has sort of started to crumble or something.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of like the sort of slight phoniness of that, I mean, it's quite a human phoniness, isn't it? But who doesn't do that sort of thing in a way? You saw it through it or something, or you didn't want it?
I don't think he came back from the war for about 3 years, so I was just with Mum and my brother. And when he did arrive, obviously I took immediate resentment because he was taking up more time of my mum than I was. Over the few years after, he started, talking about the real world and whatever that was, and the real world was what I imagined he'd come back from. But he didn't used to talk about the war or his experiences. And then I never know how old I was. I might have been 5 or 6. My parents had a very big library. There was a book with a black cover and a star on it, and it looked interesting, so I pulled it out the shelves, and it was actually a book about Auschwitz, or the concentration camps generally. My response was, oh, so that's where he's been, and so it was traumatising, he'd been, what are all his bodies doing, lying in pits, and that's what he'd been doing. That's why I never spoke about it. And this is the real world, isn't it?
Right. And that image, of course, sort of appears later, doesn't it, in terms of the graphics and stuff that Crass did?
Oh, no, it was full of pictures, the book. In my childish mind, I thought, well, if that's the real world, I'm having nothing to do with that. And that was it. And I haven't had anything to do with it.
But you still think there is a real world?
No, absolutely not. But the real world is the capitalist, Western narrative. I suppose it all started with sort of Descartes, the isolation of the self.
Do you, in some ways, date that feeling of not wanting to be part of it from that book then in some way.
Oh, totally, yeah. I said it was a trauma. I mean, up until then, bodies were my mum's body and, the comfortable world of the sort of bourgeoisie. Everything was glorious. And then this man turns up, slightly abstract and a bit cold. Well, not that I blame him, but he was having to deal with things he had seen, which is why I didn't talk about them. In my mind, damned right, he shouldn't talk about it if that's what he'd been doing. I wasn't going to have anything to do with it. And the net result was, I was expelled from 2 schools because I just wouldn't learn. I wasn't interested in learning.
So you went to these private schools, weren't they, effectively?
Yeah.
Sent there by your middle-class parents to, I suppose, inculcate you in their values or something.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, they didn't. Well, I just wasn't interested in what they'd got to offer.
Right.
I thought, everything they had to offer led to that one. That's true, sort of capitalist democracy leads to war, period.
Do you think you were even instinctively putting together those things?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I knew it was dysfunctional. It had to be dysfunctional if they buried people in their thousands in nasty lime pits. And so it wasn't a choice. I wasn't having anything to do with it. That continues to this. I didn't arrive at some sort of philosophy of anarchy or existentialism or something to find a way out. I was already out.
When we talked about this just before we started, anarchy or, as you described it, whatever-ism, you seem to be sort of saying it's not a conceptual model, it's something that actually inhabits you.
It comes through me. I mean, I do write, but if I understand what I write, I generally delete it. When something comes up which puts me in a sort of quandary of not actually understanding what the hell I'm talking about, probably there's some truth. And it has been the case that, stuff I wrote 60 years ago, now I can understand. I couldn't understand it at the time, particularly.
I want to go back to you at the school and it being very apparent to you and presumably to them that it wasn't working and how it ended.
Well, a sort of mild contempt for the people who were buying into it. I remember at a kindergarten school I was at, and someone had attacked someone with a pencil and hurt them, and no one would own up. So I did. I hadn't done it, but I did. I owned up. And that was much more powerful to me because I knew and they didn't. And it demonstrated to me the absolute absurdity of justice, and it taught me a way of undermining people's conceits. I was maybe 8 or 9 then, or even younger, defying rule by undermining it. Well, I remember, later on in my first so-called public school, getting endlessly beaten once or twice a week, caned or slippered. I was defying their authority because, pain. I took it as a sort of badge of honour, almost. And I demonstrated it as such. Break the rules then, break the rules sort of thing.
Which must have enraged them.
Well, I'm sure I became detested, yeah. Well, I was eventually expelled because the local newspapers did an article about bohemian public school boys drinking coffee out of girls' high heels. Ridiculous article.
That's the 1950s Bohemia.
Yeah, which is why I said earlier it's nice to be in Soho. I used to come up here a lot in the 50s.
Yeah, London in the 50s, you got this kind of post-war sigh of relief. What was it like then as a teenager?
I mean, it was sort of truly bohemian. I mean, beautiful mix, which I don't think one gets now, of the criminal classes and intellectuals. And there was no difference, there was no separation. Prostitution was sort of pretty clean in a strange way, it wasn't sort of like junkies sort of trying to get a fix. It was actually, working class women earning a living and doing so in actually sort of quite a decent way. I mean, you could sit around with, a table of prostitutes and really have a nice chat. There was a brothel in Hanway Street, which I used to go to. It was good coffee and it was also a good company. It was a very bohemian hangout.
You got that mixed up with, I guess, jazz? Which...
Oh, yeah. I used to haunt the Two Eyes and Ken Collier Club.
People talk about the kind of racial mix being this kind of also this massive blast of fresh air. Say at the Flamingo, where you've got black American soldiers and black jazz singers
totally,
mixing with local white kids from different classes. It's in this kind of soup, right?
Yeah. And it was truly wild. I mean, it was 10 years before the Beatles made a terrific class breakthrough. I mean, we were all doing it. I mean, it was so exciting. I mean, wildly exciting. I suppose the beginnings of punk, I used to go with Eve to the Roxy, and that I got some of that. When we appeared in the Roxy, we were asked not to come back again. That was something I'd heard before.
Badge of honour. Got kicked out of school, so what did you then do?
Well, I wanted to go to art school, but Dad was having absolutely none of it. And so he fixed me up with a job in a company called Warner and Sons, who were weavers. They did all the royal family's curtains and all that sort of stuff. And I was a salesperson there for about a year and a half, just off of Oxford Street. And we used to have to line up in the corridor when the boss arrived, and he was a Sir somebody. It was one of Dad's friends, Sir somebody or other, I can't remember now. And he'd walk along with his bowler hat and his umbrella, and he'd point the umbrella, say, shoes, polish, tie. You know, he'd never said good morning. He just went past it like a military thing. And that's how it was. I mean, it was extraordinary. Except for this misfit Jewish young woman who I took massive fancy to, and we tried screwing in one of the closet sort of places there. I don't think we managed.
Because it was too small?
No, it was just too much going on around us. I don't think we got comfortable with it.
But he would have been definitely pointing his umbrella at you if you'd
opened
the door.
Yes, yeah. He'd have pointed his umbrella to the door and said out, which eventually he did, in fact. Yeah, I worked for 2 years there. And then I just thought, no, this is just not on. And one day I said, you know, I'm on strike. I want to go to art school. I'm not going to do anything until I'm allowed to go to art school. And that took about 3 months, however long, until they broke. We lived in a private road, what would now be a gated community. A woman who lived opposite was one of the chair people from the local art school in Dagenham. And so they got me a place there, 62.
Right, so you're just shy of 20.
Yeah.
Is that where it all began?
No, it all began with that book. And it still does. It's still going on. I mean, I live in my place and the world lives in its place, you know, like Gaza. It doesn't mean I ignore it. It means I'm more able to engage in it than those who actually suffer the immediate effects of it, either by looking at too much internet here or by actually suffering it there. You don't need to know about it to feel it.
When you went to art school, did you then feel less disconnected with what was going on around you?
No, it's the same old thing. You know, old men telling you how to do things. Well, I wasn't going to be told how to do things. I knew what happened if old men told you what to do things. They'd either sort of try and wank you off in the toilet, or they'd give you some bollocks about war being marvellous and necessary, or whatever it was. Either way, they were untrustworthy. I mean, which isn't to say there weren't actually some really fantastic teachers. But I mean, I was meant to be doing a graphics course, printing or typesetting or advertising.
So it was art directed at a career, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this isn't suitable at all. So I set up an easel in the Life studio, which was the sort of best place to be. And you were confronted with another body, and you could become used to another body. And I just started painting, and, you know, no one knew what the fuck to do about it. And then eventually some of the teachers there, who also had an interest in painting, sort of joined in and said, whoa, started reacting. So I was using it for what I wanted, which was my own space. And I got a lot from it, you know, and I really enjoyed life drawing, because I think that's a really important way of learning form and learning line and all the things. Actually, when I was at Brentwood School, I was always interested in painting, and a guy called David Irving was there. He was a year older or 2 years older than me. Well, I was very friendly with a guy called Chick Henry. The only other Jew in the school was his brother, because the school really didn't like either Catholics or Jews.
And just for anybody who doesn't know, David Irving was the much respected historian until he became a Holocaust denier, right?
Absolutely. But the interesting thing was he taught me the art of shadowing. I'm to this day grateful, because, you know, he taught me how to make things look three-dimensional. He snuck up to me once when I remember I was drawing something or other in the art room, and he said, "Your friend Chick's a Jew. in a really nasty way. And I mean, I wasn't aware of the fact that Jews were, worth noting as any different. That anti-Semitism is as rife now as it ever was. It just doesn't wear the same colours or the same output. Everything in his voice was something I'd never heard before. Something, what in the material world one might call evil.
Some hatred sort of seeping through.
Yeah, your friend. I almost can feel it when I think back. What the fuck are you talking about? I mean, I'd come across some pretty nasty characters and all the rest of it, but that was strange.
So you were at Dagenham Art School, and then life painting or life drawing is the way in somehow, is it?
I mean, Krishnamurti said that, that creativity is, our true being, and I agree with him on that point. I think it is, and that creativity doesn't have to be painting or life drawing. It can be, looking after old cars or making bread, or it's the creative act comes from the heart, not from the mind. I think it was probably the first thing as a kid making their journey that made any physical, material sense. I mean, other things had done. I mean, there's an important little point in my life. I met this American artist in Positano. We used to go family holidays in Positano, beautiful place. In the little grape-bowered pathways down to the beach, this American artist used to sit there selling his paintings, and they were quite beautiful. And I used to be really attracted to him and thought, well, this is a sort of interesting-looking guy, amongst all the wealth and the pomposity of that wealth. So I became really good friends with him, and I used to sit around, rather than go down the beach, I'd sit and chat and watch him trying to sell his pictures, or if he wanted to take a day off, I took over for him and managed to sell more than him because I put the price up. People in those sort of places want to spend money, so the more you make it, the more they're going to want it. When he left, he gave me a book by Paul Reps, the beat artist, writer. So that was my introduction to Buddhism, and that was key. It was Zen Buddhism. I couldn't understand it, but I knew that it was right. It confirmed the nonsensicality of everything I perceived around me, and it put it into a picture.
Reading Paul Rep connects you with the Beats,
yes,
who had their own connection, obviously, with Buddhism, didn't they? Yeah. Co-wrote with Dharma Bums and Desolation Angels, and then Gary Snyder and that whole West Coast countercultural thing, totally, right? Yeah. So that was a kind of route into that, was it as well?
And it's something that I didn't drop till about 12 years ago, when I realised that there's formulas within Zen which are every bit as conspiratorial as Descartes or any other philosophy, trying to trick you into some particular way of thinking. At that point I dropped into Tao. Tao is nature.
I mean, I know the word Tao, it's got some connection with Buddhism, but I don't actually know what it is. What I mean,
well, really, it was the original matriarchal form. And it was basically nature. God is in all things. There is no God because it's all things. Don't give names to things that don't have names. Nothing has a name. It's all imagination. Interestingly, that is being confirmed in physics and modern day neurology.
Also, that connects you with poetry, right? Yeah. Which is, one of the streams running all the way through your life, isn't it?
Yeah. I always wrote. The year I was expelled from Brentwood School, one of my poems was published, a poem about snowfall or something, I can't remember what it was. Yeah, so I've always written, because poetry doesn't come from the intellect, it comes from the heart. If it's true poetry. I don't think there's an awful lot of true poetry for that reason. It's like if someone says they're a professional writer, they can't be a writer, or a professional artist, you can't be an artist. You can't be a something to do something, because you're doing it for the wrong reasons, or you're doing it for borrowed reasons. Anything that sort of promotes falsity, is unacceptable.
When we did the Ginsberg thing at the Horse Hospital, the two things which really struck me was, first of all, how important poetry was in the 60s counterculture. Right. I was thinking, what happened to that? But also hearing how performed was a bit of an eye-opener for me, and it's like a third eye-opener, you could sort of say, in some ways, because I just don't think I'd actually seen the potential in poetry to change minds in that way, like the Albert Hall thing, which was, as a catalytic thing, I suppose what's what I meant,
Because I wrote a thing called How, and it was a how the hell did we get to this then? I saw the greatest minds of my generation destroyed by capital. A rewrite to the exact length and the exact form of Ginsberg's poem, because Ginsberg is talking about things which have become not just discomforts, but monsters.
Not being familiar with what struck me as well is that how relevant to these times it was, even though this is a poem written in the mid-50s, right, about American culture. A lot of it, stripped of the kind of specific cultural things, could be of now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Utterly prescient. I used to perform How with Jazz Outfit. And then I was asked to do it for London Jazz Festival. So I thought, I'd better look into the sort of copyright because there might be issues. So I wrote trying to find out who held the copyright. It was HarperCollins, who were owned by gross media magnate.
Murdoch.
Yeah. And I thought, well, if Allen Ginsberg knew that Murdoch owned the copyright of How, then he'd die 20 times over. The rage of that. Because don't many things make me very angry, but that made me really angry. Because it actually has something of value, something which is precious, something which is marvellous, something which is wondrous, being shat all over. And so I rewrote it and made it pertinent to today, where sort of capitalism and pseudo-democracy and all the things which Ginsberg probably had some slight mild trust in, wiping the slate absolutely clean and saying, okay, well, what's fucking left? That was my response.
I saw the best minds of my generation gagged by the opiate of capital, fallen angels busting for a budgetary fix, established Christs nailed to cash or crucifix. Who woke in the morning divorced from reinvention, knowing where they stood because their artistry had been converted into commodity, and commodity knows what time it is. Who, ignoring the sodden patch on the pillow, which is the matter both of body and of dream, recited their own names in tawdry isolationist mantras and denied their dreams. Who, having drawn curtains to the sun, ran screaming to the banks of Mammon to store its warmth in frozen vaults where gold had once been currency, but was now no more than insulation. Who, on hearing springtime's first cuckoo, claimed intellectual copyright and stole away the spring and made currency of all the dawnings of chorus.
Going back to that 60s countercultural thing with Ginsberg and early 60s London, Soho, during this time when you're in the art school, and what happened next?
I think I started becoming sort of quite cynical. A sort of, what the fuck are you playing at? Cynical. Which I sort of expressed in that little outburst there about what had happened with Ginsberg's work. I mean, that was most expressed by Crass's engagement in the whole punk thing, which really was, Johnny Rotten, are you fucking joking or what? If you're serious, cop this. Because people are just fucking around on the edges. I've got very, very little respect for Jack Kerouac's Buddhism. Because what did Jack Kerouac end up as? Alcoholic dickhead. That's such an assault on the purity, the potential of purity. The responsibility of any artist is total. You can't sort of half play a game and sort of add a little bit because it makes it a bit nicer or more digestible or more acceptable. Fuck off. Culture's not a game. It's an absolute dedication. It's so much a dedication, it doesn't need to be called it. And anything else is fucking about and undermining potential. You know, we have the potential of beauty. We have the potential of freedom. We have all of these things. Don't need to be miserably walking along a street holding some stupid banner. That's not helping anyone. What does help is beauty and purity and fineness, all the sort of real values. And if that's just one person sitting silent in a woodland, good. Let it be, you know, and let the fools play their circus. I mean, that's my ground position now. Let the fools play their circus.
You said you started to become cynical, but is that actually what started to emerge, which was making you cynical because you're seeing that's what's not happening around you?
I think I meant with the art school bit that I became cynical. I mean, I became the very person who I had just been criticising.
Cynical about yourself then?
Yeah, I mean, I started, you know, being smart-arsed.
And you recognised that was going on?
Pretty quickly. The biggest smart-arse was knowing I'd win that Ready, Steady, Go Beatles painting competition, which I did, and appeared on telly with John and all that sort of stuff. And,
I didn't know what to say about that because it's a sort of such an odd episode in your life. Like, you basically won the competition to produce the artwork for I Want to Hold Your Hand, for their song, right?
There was a competition to do a portrait of the Beatles, which I knew I could win, so I did. And I did it for my sister, who was a massive Beatles fan. By then I was beginning to think, well, no, these guys aren't quite all they're cutting up themselves out to be. I came back to them again through some of Lennon's stuff.
But you appear on Granada's Ready, Steady, Go, a TV show, and you get a prize from Lennon in person, right? Which I'm guessing for like 99.9% of art students or young people in the UK at the time would have been like, I've made it.
Yeah.
But you didn't feel like that about it?
Not at all, no. You know, I was getting cocky with my art, and because I was very clever. I don't have a sense of line. I don't have that sort of like Degas or Lautrec or Monet or Jackson Pollock or... No, I can know why those people are artists. They're artists because they're not artists. You know, they're sort of just hard. And I didn't have that. No, I had to really try hard. So a lot of it was clever-ass ideas. And I certainly think, you know, a lot of bad art moves into the sort of literary field or the philosophical field, which is a demonstration of its paucity, not of its power. You know, there was that big show just recently at Serpentine, I can't remember her name, woman who does big black and red written things. Well, you know, if she wants to philosophise, well, fucking work as a philosopher, not as a sort of game player. I've got no time for mucking about, I think is the word I'd use.
You win the prize, but you feel like you're mucking about, so something's got to be done differently. Then.
Yeah, I did.
You become an art teacher for a while.
When I left art school, I did portraiture to earn a small living. Then I got a job at art school teaching. In those days, you'd get a job simply because someone liked your art, not because you'd got qualifications, because I didn't have any at all. And eventually I was sort of like pushed out of there because, again, I refused to conform to the sort of standards required in the staff room. What was going on in the staff room was basically young woman selection. Ooh, I don't know, I fancy. No, well, I've got that one, sort of thing. It was disgusting.
Talking about the students?
Absolutely revolting. Everyone was sir when I first started teaching, and I said, look, I don't know who you're talking about. And then I wasn't Penny, I was Jerry. I said, I'm Jerry. I'm in this boat as well. We're all in this sort of screwball situation. Let's make something of it. And if someone wanted to be a pig farmer rather than an artist, I'd try and find out about pig farming to help them to become a pig farmer, because that's what teachers are meant to do, help people, not fuck them. But that didn't seem to be the overall attitude. And actually, the head of the department there, really took umbrage. I was undermining the authority of the staff, apparently, by actually acting as one should do with the students, with respect and with an attempt to find within them something true creativity, which might be pig farming. I mean, we're using that case because there was a particular woman who wanted to become a pig farmer. Well, the rest of the staff ho-hoed it. And she was actually slightly
rotund, so she wasn't on the hit list. So one way or another, she was on a loser.
Did she become a pig farmer?
She became a farmer, yeah.
Somewhat of a happy ending. What was London like, and what was your London like at the time then?
I was living in Brentwood. But I didn't really come up to London. It didn't seem to have anything to offer. I mean, I'd always thought I'd end up in Soho, living in an attic and painting or something, or writing or whatever. And that just didn't happen. I don't know why. I just started driving around the Essex countryside on my little motorbike looking for somewhere to live, and I eventually found Dial House, which was a derelict place at the end of a lane. Managed to get it for virtually nothing, renting it. That was what I wanted. I wanted to be on my own, although I shared it with 2 other teachers from the art school initially, to hear the silence, feel the silence, be the silence.
When did you meet Gee?
At art school. And now she does have the beauty of line. She does have the Degas hit. Everything she does has that beauty within it, because it's an absolute natural, innate thing from within.
The two of you, and of course Dial House, this kind of triangle which this story kind of rotates around as for the next sort of decades, right? So you met her before you found the house?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, met her at art school. She'd never seen anyone like me. I mean, Dagenham's, quite a very working class area. She came from a very poor working class family, with all the old beautiful standards. I mean, I was so moved by that. I'd never been introduced to sort of working class values, which are so beautiful, of helping each other, generosity, looking out for each other. They were things I'd never experienced. And that was a sort of real culture shock for me, and a huge piece of learning, Oh, blimey, good people exist. You don't have to be pretending anymore. All of those little things, I don't want to glorify in a romantic way. There's a lot of hardship and a lot of suffering going on within that, but they were surviving. And it was sort of, to me, more real than anything I'd experienced socially.
So was that somewhat of a remedy to that cynicism you had there, meeting Gee and that working class culture?
When the Beatles thing, I'd been, in a little chat with John, and then it was over, and the cameraman shoved me physically out of the way because he wanted to, pull the whole rig further down. And I thought, oh, fuck you. So I wanted to get back to the art school, where I knew they'd all been watching telly, and Gee was sort of pretty unimpressed.
That must have impressed you.
Well, it confirmed what I already knew, maybe. And I think that was probably, so the reason I said that cynicism thing, it sort of built up to that. My time at art school built up to me being a prat, basically, and that knocked shit out of me, that whole thing, I mean, you can't maintain this unless you sort of really work hard on it, being a person in the big capitalist world.
Well, it's also quite sort of significant, isn't it, that what goes on the screen, on the camera,
oh yeah,
as soon as that's done, everybody just reverts to being, get out the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Sort of, you're no longer needed. It's all for this kind of image thing, isn't it?
And that's a very good sort of parable about how it is in the material world. Play the game, and when you've played it, fuck off out of here, and don't expect anything. It's sort of pretty much how it is.
So Gee was not impressed. That fact and meeting her family was, in some ways, was offset the cynicism about things.
It brought me down to, no, you're going in the wrong direction, fella. Much later in the story, a heart attack on Rochdale Station, did the same, knocking zen out of me. I was starting to build up a big picture again, where I've started, it happened slightly when we put our second album out with Crass, because some idiot said, you're going to be bigger than the Beatles to me, and I sort of thought, great. And that lasted a few months only, but there are those little moments in life where I've almost been bought in.
The inflation starts.
Yeah. Everything's bought on credit in that world. It can only be maintained through credit. And so my complete revulsion towards it is deeply felt.
And that's why I'm an anarchist who isn't an anarchist, you know. I mean, not because I read Kropotkin or those people, because I didn't. I mean, I think anarchy is being yourself, you know, but the big one on that is to ask, well, just who or what is that self? I mean, it's the only one to ultimately offer freedom.
The deeper you look, the less there is to see.
Yes, absolutely. Nothing is a great place, or nowhere is a great place to be.
It's that moment of going over the edge on the roller coaster, the drop.
But the drop isn't what it might seem in the sort of material sense. It's absolutely an explosion of form and totality and an absolute belongingness, which is absolutely impervious to any form of cynicism, of criticism, because there's nothing there to receive the attack.
Or the attention, or the affirmation.
No, precisely.
One has put so much energy into maintaining the chimera.
Well, that's the great privilege I had of opening that book when I was 4 or 5. I wasn't going to have anything to do with it because it stunk. And my anger, like I expressed about what happened with Ginsberg, was partly directed towards him, a naivety, or my anger towards Kerouac, the same, or Jesus Christ, naive. You have to live the philosophy. You can't just take a bit of it or forget a bit of it halfway down the road because it doesn't feel too comfortable.
The discomfort of the drop, that might open into some impossibly abundant space, but also it can be quite terrifying. So the temptation is to pull back, is to sort of be half-hearted, you know.
I believe there's only one form of true healing, and that is being in that place, because then you are of it, not creating differences within it. You know, and my process for that is meditation, but there are other ways. Climbing came close to it. I took up mountaineering for a long time, and so climbing came close to putting you in that place.
Held in thrall, yet curled about the trajectory. Today the swallows will depart to reclaim their Nile. But now, still early, they circle on warm thermals, in memory of summer's joy, awaiting the compulsive drive. The stone sphinx also awaits, smiling, feline, in the sands. Listen, the falcon, the buzzard, the hunting birds, beware. Listen then, the distant call of unspoken warnings, the whisper. There is France, mist-cloaked and argumentative. There are ice-wrapped Alps, toothy old Dolomites. There is ancient Italy, umber-brown, sensu sleeping. There are gorgeous seas, yet always the hunters. See the shadow and see yourself in flight, yet know also the talons, know the strike. And still the swallows drift, awaiting the call.
If we go back to the early mid-60s, what about psychedelics?
No.
Didn't work for you?
It was not a matter of not working. They weren't going to work for me because I didn't use them. No, I didn't use them because I knew it was just another motor ride. You don't learn the countryside sitting in a car. You don't hear the birds sing. You don't anything that was synthetic, whether the drugs themselves are synthetic or natural, is irrelevant to me. You don't get anywhere because you don't know where you've been. And I mean, I know sufficient numbers of fucked up people through psychedelics. Ayahuasca, as practiced by the native people of Peru or, you know, of South America, is the obvious. It's the natural odour of the landscape. And herbalism was about that. You know, that was our old equivalent. Westerners choose the easy side of it. not the set of beliefs, the wondrous beauty of being inherent and innate within a landscape. Oh no, we'll go along and, bowl back a bit of substance and come back thinking we've met God. It's so much more beautiful than that. It's so much more total than that. And I think that just separates people more from their deeper unself, if you want to use that term, rather than self. Because really the true self is the unself. Even Sartre said, the ego is every bit as much a construct as any other thing. There's nothing to be feared because there's nothing there.
I had a sort of vision of this with regard to myself as like having built this kind of fortress which is on the edge of the sea, and it's always being hit by the waves of the tide. It's always being eroded, so there's a huge amount of energy goes into trying maintaining the walls. But like one of those kind of curtain wall castles, what's it actually protecting? And in the interior, there's nothing actually there. You sort of fear the construction itself going down, but what's the construction actually for? Actually, let's pause that massive conversation about the self there. I'm going to come back to that one because I do want to get a little bit further on in your story. But let's just go back to G, working class culture. You met and you connected artistically, obviously in many other ways, right? You came to Dial House. How that move was inspired by the film The Inn of the Sixth Happiness.
I didn't look for a place to create an open house at. I looked for a place to be a studio. And then I had a little James motorcycle, and G and myself used to drive around the Essex countryside whenever we'd got time off from whatever we might have been doing, looking for somewhere that looked suitable, and eventually found Dial House.
What was its history?
Well, it's a very old place. I mean, I think it's about 450 years old in places, and it was derelict, tumble down, brick-faced, timber-framed, got a long history. I imagine probably 2 or 3 families used to live in it. For me, it was sort of like a silent, peaceful place to get on with my work. And I taught 2 or 3 days a week, but all the rest of my time I just painted.
And it's an open house. So what does that mean?
When I half got shoved out and half resigned from being a teacher, I went back to Dial House and I thought, what do I do? I mean, I'd been inspired to leave by one of the students, because I was always telling the students, you can't become an artist by being professional. You've got to let go of everything. And this sort of bright spark at the back, who remained a very close friend, said, well, you're not a very good example of it, are you? Here you are, And I thought, fucking right, I'm not, bullshitting. And so that was a part of my desire to move on. So when I left the art school, I went back and I just had this idea, but I didn't know how to put it into practice. And then I remembered the Inn of the Sixth Happiness and how it was a place where people could go and sort of earn their meal and a bed for the night, by telling stories. And that's how I was going to make it. So I explained to the other 2 guys I was living with, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to make it somewhere where people could just come and be and tell a story. And they didn't like the idea, so they left. So then I was on my own, and then I thought, well, how do you do this? Then I just thought, well, you just wait for it to happen. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, I had to work on the farm, that summer to pay whatever little rent or food and et cetera, et cetera. And I was working in potato picking, actually, and this young lad came up and said, are you Jerry? I said, yeah. And he said, have you got a place? Well, I hadn't told anyone or anything, I hadn't advertised it. I didn't go down the pub and talk about it because I don't go to pubs. So that was strange. I said, well, yeah, I've got a place, come back. So he was my first visitor. And that was the principle, wait and see what happens. There wasn't any rules. I didn't set up any conditions. By then I was vegetarian anyway. I'm now vegan, but that's the only condition, really, just about, for anyone being there.
People still come, stay?
Oh, yeah.
Tell stories?
Yeah. And I mean, it was just an idea of letting people be, and I wasn't going to start,
telling them things or how to do things. People just find out for themselves. And largely that's how it's run for over 50 years, you know. I don't involve myself, even if things are not as I might like them, because unless I'm asked, how do I know any better? You know, if someone's planting onions upside down, that's their problem, not mine. Well, it will be mine when we don't get any onions, but it's not for me to question. If someone says, how do you plant onions, you know, I'm quite expert at and knowledge of it. I know the soil and et cetera, et cetera. But if they, you know, just want to plant them upside down, it did happen.
Somebody plant them upside down?
Yeah, I watched her doing that and thought, no, I'm not going to tell her. Why should I tell her? You know, not now anyway. You know, a week or so later when she wasn't around, I put them all the right way around again. And I did eventually tell her. But I told her at the right moment. You know, she was doing something out of love and probably, you know, being very romantic and sentimental maybe even about it. I didn't want to break her little dream at the time. I could do it in a more gentle environment, you know, away from it.
You're still there, right?
Yeah.
These days seems like an incredibly long time, doesn't it, to be in the same place, you know, sort of.
Well, it wouldn't seem so to any sort of indigenous person, you know, yes. And indigeny is one of the things that we most suffer from the loss of.
Dial House has kind of been at the centre of many of the things that you've done since, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, we're in the process currently of putting it into trust so that in 50 years' time it will still serve the same function. I mean, it's quite a modest place, you know. It's a lovely old house, and it's, you know, it's run down and crumbling in places, etc., and it's a very simple life. And it's a quite hard life. And most people in town wouldn't come in winter because it's so very cold. You know, we burn wood. Well, and if you burn wood, it means that I'm outside chopping for 2 days every week during winter. And I love that. I love the fact that I'm in touch with nature, and I'm not just in touch with it, I am it. And after 50 or 60 years of living in the same place, I'm a part of it.
That's what indigenous means?
Yes. Then the feeding is mutual. You know, I learn from it. I learn the meaning of belonging. I belong. I'm here. I'm not here. And not bullshitting on the way. And I do. I mean, yeah, there's been times where I've started bullshitting, you know, like after that John Lennon thing, you know. I feel let down by people like Kerouac, not jubilant. He wrote one of the most beautiful, I think Dharma Bums is one of the most beautiful books. But what fucking happened? How did he get to that?
That's a big, big question, isn't it? Can you separate the work from the person who made it?
I don't believe you can. Because that means the artist isn't taking full responsibility for the art. In other words, the beingness of it.
It's like the inflation that can happen with a bit of success, right? Or it's intoxicating, isn't it?
I'm very happy to say I don't feel intoxicated.
But Kerouac became intoxicated, and he died of intoxication.
It became a parody of himself, and it was the parody of himself that became a drunken idiot. I know very few people who I would regard as being true to that deeper self.
Penny, we've got to the end of the day.
Yeah.
We didn't get to the festival, but you mentioned it.
I don't think we've even got beyond the book yet.
There's massive holes in this which I need to fill in, but we're going to do that next time. Thank you for today.
Yes.
I really appreciated that. It's sort of opened up about 100 doors that I need to decide which ones to step through.
I mean, I could go on for 2 hours on any one of the things we talked about. And they'll always lead to the same place.
Where is that?
Nowhere.
Excellent.
No, and I mean that.
I know you do.
The body of my work is dissolution.
What's being dissolved?
The whole fabric of the material world. I am that thing. I am that nothing. I am that nowhere. Yes, it's fearful from the outside, but when finally one is engulfed by it,
there's nothing to fear.
There's nothing to fear because you are it. That's a complete absolution. Death, what's the difference? I'm already dead. Death is massively expansive. It's actually the falling away and into the great space of our particle being. We're just dancing particles.
When we met last time, I asked you something, because when I wake up in the morning, there's a few moments when I don't know who I am
Yeah.
or even where I am. It's just when I'm in my own place,
Yeah.
right? Do you know this experience?
Yeah.
It's almost like you come to again. You've woken up, but then you come to.
Yeah.
And it's actually strangely positive.
Yeah. Well, because for a moment you're there. And you're actually recreating. I mean, every morning we reaffirm the material nature of that which is around us.
You open the wardrobe, you put your clothes. It's like you kind of get dressed again every morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You cover yourself over with everything, and are you just as much dress yourself with the wardrobe as you do with the clothes within it? It's the same process. It's the big cover-up. When you know it's a cover-up, it's no longer a cover-up. And I don't mean know it in an intellectual, philosophical sense. When you can see it as, you know it is. And I can play the material game, this being a good example of it.
Play it as in, we have an interview, we talk about the past.
Yeah, I don't do the past. I mean, I don't do, as I said when we started, I don't do anecdotes. I'm a master of them, actually. But I don't do them in my relationship. In fact, I'm sort of pretty much known by people who know me as being someone who doesn't talk. I don't. I can sit happily with someone for hours and hours and hours without a word.
I mean, you did say at the beginning that an interview is basically a kind of constructed thing, isn't it? However, I do think there's value for others, I'm one of the others, in these conversations.
I absolutely agree with that. And I, in a sort of cynical sense, I use these situations in the belief that if one person is positively affected by some of what I might have to offer, then I'll go on doing it, which is exactly my same philosophy as a performer. If one person gets slightly directed towards some deep truth, then my job is done. I'm not interested in money. I'm interested only in touching heart and having my heart touched, because I am touched. I care only about that deep being that we all are, not the one that makes us separate and different, because we're not separate. Anywhere I can use a situation to help someone who wants to become a pig farmer, I'll do it.
That was Penny Rimbaud, part 1, part 2 to come. We've heard various tracks, music by Penny with collaborators. I'll list those in the show notes, along with some other links. As I said at the beginning, I found this conversation quite challenging in some ways, but in very positive ways. And at the end, I felt oddly joyful just being with Penny. You might hate me saying this, but I couldn't help wondering if he'd broken on through to the other side, is enlightened, but not in a sort of sitting on the cushion benevolently smiling at the world sort of way of enlightenment. It seems for him that peace is a fire. Thanks to my recent correspondents, Simon, Alaura, Dorothy and Owen. And thanks to you for listening. Let's keep listening. I will see you further down the road, around the bend, and over the hillsides for more of these conversations and these tales from the other side.
You brave old land that stands so firm, you fortress against time, you rocks and stones so long before me, you green ivy so metallic in your grip, you mighty oak, mightier still in the root, that there we are entire. You brave old land, your service to industry, which also destroys you, you copper and iron, the smelt and the casting, the transference. And in valleys lost beneath woodland, chimneys haunt the moment, where once hunting knives were crafted, yet still remind of clogged feet and a calling. But you, the mountains,
Hold firm in your spell, while the winds embrace you to renew you. Tufted grass and gorse, hawthorn and ash are sculpted to better represent you. The blanket rain cloud drifts in to wrap you, to feed the streams by which I too am fed. Always the cleansing